I'm Harold Chapman from Drive Inc. I appreciate you guys taking the time to view our video. Apologize for not being able to be there in person, but this should serve as an initial introduction for you guys. If you guys would like an on-site visit, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be on the last slide. A little bit about our company, our history. We were formed in 2005 with the mission of saving manufacturing in North America. We have grown steadily over the past years. Our client list continues to grow and it becomes more diverse. You can see we work on anything from what we would consider repeat widget manufacturing up to high custom, high engineered to order environments. So we feel very comfortable working in any of those environments, any product, any service. We've kind of narrowed in on manufacturing, but what we do can apply to many different industries. Some of our credentials, we have at the point of this video, we have 16 proven business leaders, minimum of 20 years direct experience with business transformation, system improvement, design value streams, manufacturing value stream, P&L responsibilities, support systems such as HR, finance, sales, and research and development. Our recruiting process makes sure we only bring guys or ladies to the table that have this experience, this in-depth experience. We don't want to have our clients training our people. So we bring that experience to the table. Some of our lean certifications are from Toyota, University of Kentucky, University of Michigan, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology. MIT is what they're better known for. So these are kind of our company credentials. This number 16, we're continuing to grow. We're adding about the rate of 2 a year to our stable, and we grow at a steady pace because we're trying to hold these credentials, so we can't overgrow, because finding people with this skill set is kind of hard to do. Why do you want to choose Drive? First and foremost, our experience. We bring profound knowledge of lean manufacturing to the table, and we apply that thinking to your processes. We always like to say, we know lean better than our clients, but our clients know their processes better than us, and together we can do some pretty cool things. We focused on hands-on implementation. We're not the kind of consultants that are going to sit in the boardroom or sit in the office somewhere and make your guys go do all the work. We're going to be shoulder to shoulder working with you guys through this implementation process. We believe firmly in the concept of, hear, see, do. They're going to hear some examples. They're going to see some of the examples applied, and then we're going to, together as a team, we're going to go out and we're going to do it together. And we're going to learn by doing. It's a strong foundational principle for us. We're what you might call dirty engineers. We get into the process. If it's in the design size, we're going to get into CAD. We're going to get into SolidWorks. We're going to get into Inventor. Whatever it takes, we're going to get in there and help your guys. If it's in manufacturing and painting, we're going to roll our sleeves up and, maybe we'll put a Tyvek suit on for that one, but we're going to get in there and we're going to get dirty. Customized solutions. So if it was, our premise is, if it was easy, our clients would have already done it. So we're up against some pretty hard stuff here, and the solutions are not going to be simple. They're going to be customized to your specific application. So we're going to use your people to create your solutions, and then we come up with some pretty cool solutions that way. Results versus theory. We're going to make sure we get results. We're not going to just sit around and talk about, what would be nice to do, what is possible. We're actually going to go hit the ground, and we're going to get some results out of this. Now, those results continue over time and get bigger over time, but we're going to focus on those results. We work at all levels of the organization. We like to say we can go from concrete to carpet. So, regardless of where we're at in an organization, we may be in a boardroom in the morning talking about, the fundamentals of continuous improvement. We may be out on the floor in the afternoon designing a work cell. We work very comfortably across that whole span. enterprise level improvement. So we're not just looking at operations. That's a fallacy that a lot of people have, is this lean stuff is just for manufacturing. This thinking process works across the enterprise. Sales, marketing, distribution, customer service, post-sale, all of that's in range. Wherever the problem is, let's go there. That's where we're going to go, and that's where we're going to fix the enterprise. Focus on bottom line results. At the end of the day, if we're not bringing results to the bottom line, we haven't earned the right to be in your business. So we tell our guys, if you're there on a Monday, you have to earn the right to be there on that Tuesday. It's not a given. We don't do long-term contracts and hold our clients accountable to those. Our contract is, you let us in the door, that's a vote of confidence. It's our opportunity, and our determination is to earn your respect every day and earn the right to come in that following day. If we don't do that, you don't have to have us in. We've proven ROI. We have case studies. If you'd like to see some of those, please reach out to me. Again, my contact information is on the last slide. We'll send you case studies related to the work that we do. We have proven ROI. If you looked at all of our clients since our inception, we have a 2,800% ROI. Now, we guarantee when we are allowed to control the implementation and do the implementation, we guarantee a 200% ROI. So for every dollar you give us, we guarantee $2 back. So we believe in ROI. We think that holds us accountable. That gives us some skin in the game, and it helps protect our customers as well. And our guys know that when they're going in, that they're being held accountable to that ROI. The 200% guarantee I've already mentioned on all implementation efforts. So we have to be involved in that to make sure it happens. The risk we take is if we're not involved in the implementation, is the client's not implementing, and then it's shown as us being at fault. So that's why we include in the implementation phase. We focus on partnership. We do this with your people, not to your people. So when we're there, we become a part of the team. If you're in a certain industry, we will not work with your competitor. We let you know everything we see. So one of our guys may be in the plant working on, lean line design or, order to cash type value streams, and we see something over here going wrong. We're going to point that out and say, hey, I'm not here to focus on this, but I just want you to know that this problem is occurring. We work as though we're an extension of your business. So it's all about we, not us and them. It's about we as a business, we become part of your business. We think like a business owners, and we integrate with your business. So in the global marketplace, you guys know this, companies are chasing lower wages. So if the cost of products must go down, the easiest way to do that is to go chase labor. Now, that's not the best way, but it is the easiest way. So when they do that, they go to these underdeveloped regions and they start building the infrastructure. So they abandon the infrastructure in the developed regions. You want to see a good example of that? Go to Detroit. You're going to start also seeing that. Some of that happened along the border cities in Mexico. Companies just vacated. Now, those same companies, they're not solving problems by moving to low-cost countries or low-cost locations. They're simply just moving the problem. And we would rather stay where we are today, and let's fix the problem. We believe that we can get cost out of the business by fixing the problems we have in our business. So products are becoming more and more commoditized. So again, it's price being driven down, and consumers, we're accustomed to paying low prices, so we're not willing to pay those high prices anymore. Unless you have a product that has a very unique value proposition where you can charge based on the value and it's not a commodity, you're going to be stuck with this commoditization. Now, if you are a custom product, there's a lot of things that were custom at one time, and they become commoditized. So you may not be a commodity today, but that risk is still there. So you need to start now getting that price in line. Now, if we look at what what happens over time, the customer at the end of the day, they determine the price. So we determine the margin we want. So if the customer is driving the price down, in this case, we'll say, the customer's this black line here, they're constantly wanting a cheaper and cheaper product. Now, if we reduce our cost at the same rate, we can maintain our margin. That's our business. Now, if we hold our cost of goods flat, at some point there's going to be a crossover here. Now, some companies will start changing here, but most will either exit the business at this point, or they'll simply offshore and try to get that margin back to a lower cost labor region. What we recommend is let's start now and let's follow this line all the way down. Now, a lot of companies have done this very well, and they're sitting on tons of cash that they can use to fund other ventures because of this. And they use this margin here to determine how, in some cases, how much market share do I want? Well, I don't want all of the market share because it may not make sense for you. So we can just adjust our market share by lowering the price of our product to gain more market share. So the cool thing is you get to determine what you do with that margin. If you're not reducing costs, you will eventually be caught up with, and you will either be forced to offshore or to exit the business. Now, we hope that you guys aren't in that situation. We hope that you guys are kind of up in here, and we just want to come in beside you and help you maintain your margin. If you find yourself down in this area, we can do some things there too to help save the business, turn it around, whatever, to get you back up into the margin, at least the positive margin range. So meanwhile, if you look at what's happening in North America, we pay people for attendance versus productivity. So if people show up for work, the expectation is I get paid, whether I'm productive or not. And there's a big difference between being productive and being busy. A lot of times you hear this in plants, hey, the boss is coming. What do they say? The boss is coming, you better get busy, not you better get productive. So people stay busy, and you can look out at a factory and you can see lots of activity. But when you really start looking at what is that activity, is it value added? Is the customer paying us for that? What you'll find is there's very little activity that falls into that category. So we have that busy versus productive going on, and then we cover up our problems. So we have excess inventory, we have excess labor, we have excess capacity in the form of equipment, and we have excess floor space in the form of buildings, and those cover up our problems. So when a company says, I really don't have that many problems, what I can find, or we as a company, we find every single time is they have excess inventory, excess labor, capacity, or space. And if we remove that, we save that money, but we also expose those problems, and we get to solve those problems. So companies that haven't begun a lean journey, I'm not sure where you guys are at as a team yet, but if you haven't begun your lean journey, we can have up to, believe it or not, 50% excess labor. Now, a caveat before we don't go to reduce this in the beginning. What we look for is opportunities to redeploy our labor. So if you have 50% excess labor, we're not going to come in and say, hey, get rid of 50% of your people. What we are going to say is, let's look at freeing up people, and let's use those people to help us solve some of these other problems that we know we have. And we'll just what I would prefer is to absorb those people with 50% more sales. That'd be ideal. But if I have to reduce people, we're only going to do it through attrition. We're going to, if you have a 5% attrition rate, it's just going to slowly bleed those people off. You're just not going to replace those. Or you may have some performance issues that you haven't dealt with because you're too afraid of letting people go because you can't get other people in. So there's ways to deal with that excess labor other than layoffs. One of our rules is you can't do a layoff due to this kind of stuff. If you do, you'll do that one time and you won't get another chance to do it. So we do not. And if we have a client that is bringing us in with that purpose, we will refuse that work, because that is not our goal as a company, is not to just go in and headhunt. Too many consultancies have done that before us. So when we look at if we can't compete on price, then what do we need to focus on to gain this margin, to add more value to the consumer, right? So if it's just price, if you just look at price, it's going to be hard to beat, countries like China that are getting, material subsidized and they have super cheap labor. So we need to work on our cost. Don't get me wrong. We need to work on our cost of operating the business, our cost of goods sold. Definitely need to improve that. But there's some other things that we can do to also help us add value to our customer. And those are innovation, quality, lead time, respect for people, and cost savings. So regardless of where you're at in the world, where you produce product, you want to make sure that you are producing product for that market, manufactured by labor in that same market with raw materials recycled or created from that same market. So if it just makes sense, if you're selling product in the U.S., you should manufacture that product in the U.S. and you should use raw materials from the U.S. That's just ideal condition. I could say the same thing for China. If you're making a product for China, it makes a lot more sense to find the raw materials in China, use the people in China to make that product for China. That's an ideal condition. You eliminate a lot of waste by doing it, a lot of waste in transportation by doing that. So the main driver for this reasoning is this whole thing about transportation, less inventory. So we know transportation equals inventory. So if I can reduce transportation and therefore reducing inventory, I can reduce my lead time. And at the end of the day, we're looking for a lower and lower lead time in our value streams. So there's a book written by Stock and Hout from MIT, and they did a lot of research in this. It's a real analytical book, so if you want to read that, feel free. The nugget out of that book is they studied many different markets, many different industries in different countries, and they came up with this formula. If you can reduce your order lead time, so order to cash lead time, by 3/4, you will see a 2x increase in productivity and a 20% decrease in total cost for the business. So the book is called Competing Against Time, and it was written by G. Stock and T. Hout in the 90s, early 90s. It's an MIT book. It's an excellent read if you like that kind of reading. If not, this is basically the nugget out of it. This focusing on lead time, driving productivity and cost reduction. So we always say, with that understanding, that improving flow always results in reduced cost. So we're constantly looking at reducing that flow. So when we look at innovation, customers are willing to pay for more innovative items. So the faster you can innovate, the more willing they're going to pay for that. We see that a lot in the technology industries, where if you can come up with this new gadget, they'll pay more for it. You have your early adopters that they'll pay an extreme amount for it, but then even in some of the main flow of products and consumers, you'll get some connections as well. The company that can provide this innovation the fastest will win in this faster iteration. So if you can't provide new items quickly, if you have to manage an offshore supplier. So if you can imagine, I'm trying to innovate quickly in the U.S. market, but my prototypes and all of that, my innovation supply is coming out of China. I'm not going to be able to keep up with that. So there's going to be a market for fast response to these innovative items locally. So being able to work closely with the supplier or your customer, develop prototypes, launch in days and weeks versus months and years, that will drive extreme value in the future. I don't know what business you guys are in, but there may be some linkages there for you guys if you think locally. So we have to have obsession for quality. We always say earn the right to work right. When we're focused on a business enterprise, the first thing we look at is safety. If we can't send people home the way we found them, shame on us. We don't deserve to be in business at all. So safety is the primary focus. Then we look at the quality. So when people hear quality, a lot of times they think about quality of the product. When we say quality, we're thinking quality of the product as well as the quality of the process that created that product. So we believe quality processes will yield quality products. So we focus on both of those. So when you hear us say quality, we're referring to both of those. The next thing we focus on then is delivery. You have a quality product. If you can't make it and deliver it, your customer's going to go somewhere else. And then finally, the last thing we focus on is cost. So we say you have to earn the right to focus on cost by being safe, quality product, delivery to your customer. Now, you may increase your cost to make those happen, and then you can decrease those over time. But the thought is, don't focus on cost first. If you go there first, you will negatively impact these two. And what will happen is you'll end up losing your customer base, and then you don't need to worry about cost anymore. Understanding value. If we looked inside if we drew a box around your entire enterprise and we looked at everything that happened in there, we'll call those activities. And then some of those activities are value added. Now, what our definition of value add is any activity that changes fit, form, or function of the product or service in conformance with customer expectations. So I could put that activity on an invoice and say, I'm doing this, and charge them for it, and they're willing to pay me. We'll call that value add. So they're paying us, in some cases, to weld. They're paying us to cook. They're paying us to do some kind of processing that they're not willing to do. So we'll call any of those activities value add. Now, the next group of activities is called value aiding, or non-value added, some of which are value aiding. Now, things that aid value are maintenance. Maintenance doesn't add value unless the customer's paying us for a maintenance contract or a service contract. But in general, maintenance on our assets is not value added, it's value aiding. We know what happens if you don't do maintenance, so we have to do maintenance. Material handling, materials have to get to the point of use. Statistical process control, if we're using it to control the quality of the process. Production reporting, if we're using that data to make decisions and then responding to problems the first time. We'll call those all value aiding. Now, you'll notice we have responding to problems the first time as value aiding. The second, third, and fourth time, we're going to call that waste, because you didn't think it was important enough to solve the first time, so we're going to call it waste going forward. So there's a lot of activities we do called value aiding. We need to focus on making those very efficient. And then there's activities that we'll call waste. Now, these activities should be targeted for elimination. Now, we use the acrostic of downtime here to remember the waste. D stands for defect. So anytime we make a product and we have to make it again or rework it, we'll call that a defect. Overproduction, that's when you make a product, you're making more product than your customer can use, whether that be a final customer, whether that be the next step in the process. That's called overproduction. And it's really the worst type of waste because it drives all these other waste. It creates inventory, it creates waiting, those kind of things. W is waiting, so this could be parts waiting, information waiting, people waiting, just standing there waiting for information, standing there waiting for equipment to start up, equipment downtime, those kind of things. The N stands for not using creativity. So when we have people in our business, we need to be engaging those people in solving their problems in their area. So when we go into an area and we work on problem solving and we don't use those guys, that's not using our people's creativity. So we always want to make sure we include them. The people doing the work should improve the work is kind of our motto. Transportation, anytime I see things moving around, that's not adding value. I will add a caveat to that. If you're in a distribution business, we'll say excess transportation. So if you're going from point A to point B, the customer's not willing to come to your site and get that. I understand that, so you're actually adding a value there. But if you go point A to point B, we'll call that excess, and we'll say excess transportation. But the goal there is to create situations where things aren't transported, so they're not moving too far from each other. So I have process A and process B over here when they could be here. So within a plant, we're looking at transportation. In distribution, we're looking at efficiency. Inventory, if I overproduce, I'm going to have to store that inventory somewhere. I get to count that inventory. I get to move that inventory. Sometimes there's defects in that inventory, so I get to scrap that inventory. So we consider all inventory waste. The ideal condition for inventory is 0. We're doing 1.1 piece flow through the process. Inventory can also be information. So storing up information in the process. So engineering drawings, bill of materials being worked on. Anytime there's information being stored between processes, not in like a retainer, but between processes waiting to be processed further, we're going to call that inventory. Motion, when an operator or someone's doing their job, they should be able to do their function right here. If they're having to walk over here to do something, walk over here, or go searching for things, all of that's excess motion. We consider that waste and should be eliminated. Excess processing that's what the E stands for. That's doing more than what the customer's willing to pay for. Example would be the customer would pay for a finish, just a plain metal finish, and we insist on sanding it, or we insist on painting it, or it's a machine component. The customer will take a 0.1 millimeter tolerance, and we insist on giving them 0.1 micron tolerance. So the cost, that's an extra cost. The customer's not willing to pay for that preciseness, so we get to pay for that. Another excess processing is testing. If we go through all these manufacturing processes, and then at the end we test, and if, it's always funny to me, you test it, fails, test it, fails, test it, pass it, goes, right? It's not like, well, you need to pass 3 times since you failed 3 times. But anyway, so anytime we test a product, it's an excess processing. We should be able to build that product without having to test it. Now, I understand if you have quality issues, please test your product. You don't want to send bad product. But the understanding is that last step that's tested is a excess processing, and it's a waste, and we shouldn't have to do that. Now, when we talked about that value-added definition, everything, what we do to change fit, form, or function of the product or service in conformance with customer expectations, that percentage of time that we're doing that is very low. And I'm going to show it to you here, but anybody in the room want to guess what it is? I hear things like 20%, 50%, 80% in some cases. But at the end of the day, if I look at the order to cash value stream and just watch the product or service, the time that is actually having value added to it in a world-class company, mind you, is 5%. Now, if it's 5% in a world-class company, what do you think it is in an average company prior to their lean transformation? Well, it's 0.1%. Now, that's a very low number. Now, the bad news is it's 0.1% value add. The good news is there's a 99.9% opportunity to improve the business. So I'll go with the positive side of that all day long. So we have some work to do in most business, in all businesses, to improve this value add percent. So flowing value to the customer is the primary objective of any enterprise. It says manufacturing here, it could be any enterprise. Our goal is to flow value. And the person that can flow it the fastest, the cheapest, with the highest quality, best delivery, safest is going to win. So you can't do it alone, so you got to respect your people. And one of the best ways to respect your people is to engage them in the process. So some core tenets of this belief is no loss of regular jobs due to continuous improvement projects. If we use our people to improve our business and we let them go, shame on us. And you'll get to do that one time. We have to make it easy for people to do the right thing. If we're designing processes and workflows and it's easier to do the wrong thing than the right thing, we can't blame them for doing the wrong thing. It's our jobs as leaders and engineers is to design processes that make it easy to do the right thing. We have to provide a safe workplace, safe, ergonomically sound working environment. People can't be scared to come to work. They can't come into a cloudy, dungy poor working environment. It's our jobs to provide that. And that's both physically and mentally. So we have to provide an environment where it's easy to succeed. It's easy to be good, it's easy to grow, and it's easy to learn. We have to provide challenging work. People like to be challenged. For years, companies have paid for hands. We want to pay for, we want their hands, we want their backs, we also want their minds. And if we do that well, we can at some point get their heart too, and then we really got them. We've got their loyalty, we've got their trust. We have to utilize people to their optimum capability. So you may have people in positions that don't go there. They go in a different position, and you're beating them up in that position. So we have to make sure people have the right fit. We have to give workers what we owe them before we can ask them to give us what they owe us. And that is, as managers, as leaders, we owe our workers a safe environment. We owe them materials that work. We owe them processes and methods that work, machines that work, and measurement systems that work. If we don't provide all of that, it's not fair for us to ask them to give us a quality output at the right rate. Right? So a lot of times people find themselves, expecting a lot of the operators when we haven't provided what we owe them first. Machines that work, materials that work, methods that work, and the measurement systems that work. So we have to give them all of that. And we also have to respond to problems. So when an operator says, hey, I'm running this process, and hey, I've got a problem, let's respond to that problem. In the beginning, it's going to be us responding and helping provide a solution. But we also, as part of a lean transformation, we're going to shift how that works as well, which I'll go over in a moment. But in the beginning, we have to respond to those problems. If we don't respond, they'll eventually stop exposing the problems. They'll figure a way around it, and then at some point all of those workarounds will impact our customer. Now, when we look at how problems are exposed in an organization, we have what we call the wrong flow, and then I'll also go over what we call the right flow. This is going to be the wrong flow of problems. So in this case, the worker provides problems to the manager. Now, the manager is typically about 10% of the organization is what we'll call a manager. 90% of the organization is what we'll call a worker. Now, can 10% of the organization sustain problems being generated by 90% of the organization? In most companies, that's not sustainable. But nonetheless, this is kind of how it works out. So the worker exposes the problem. The manager then gives the worker a solution. Now, in most cases, the manager doesn't understand the work as well as this person here. Now, the worker, they're there 8, 10, 12-hour days. They understand that process better than anybody else in the company just because they're there the whole time. Now, the manager feels responsible to give a solution because in a lot of cases, that's how they got their job, is being right more than they were wrong. Now, if the manager remembers and gives the solution, that's one thing. But sometimes the manager is so busy that they forget. Right, so Sally gave me a problem. I had 1,000 things on my plate. I forgot hers. So what Sally thinks is not, Harold doesn't care about my problem. What Sally thinks is, Harold doesn't care about me as a person. And in that case, we've created some tension there that she may not voice that. She may just harbor that resentment against me without me knowing, and me having completely forgotten about her problem. So we gotta break this cycle at some point. But if we continue with this wrong flow of problems, the worker then gives a poor result to the manager, and then the manager has to give negative feedback. So the worker at this point is thinking, hold on, I exposed a problem, they gave me a solution, it was bad, then I get negative feedback? That doesn't sound right. So what they decide to do is, I'll just work around. I'll figure it out, I'll come up with a better way, or I'll at least come up with a way to get it done, and then all problem solving is stopped at that point. So what we end up with is a condition where now there's a lot of workarounds going on here. Now the manager's not hearing problems anymore. So from the manager's standpoint, that person's thinking, hey, no news is good news. Well, in this case, no news is not good news. It's bad news, because what it means is your folks have given up on you and they just figured out how to do it on their own. So a lot of companies, find themselves in this situation, and we like to break that cycle. So we have what we call the correct flow of problems. Now, in this case, the manager becomes the coach and the worker becomes the learner. So still 10% coaching, 90%. So can 10% of the organization coach 90% of the organization? Yeah, it's a little bit more sustainable. The manager's going to manage by walking around, and they're going to look for visual management cues. So you set up the factory in a way that it can literally be managed from the back of a horse. So I can ride around, I can see all of my visual indicators, and I only have to respond to the exceptions. So I've set it up in such a way that I can look at everything that's going on and just respond to the problems. Now, when I respond to the problems, that's me surfacing problems to my worker. Now, my worker will then, or learner in this case, will give me a proposal. Now, that proposal may not be right the first time. In most cases, it's not. And this proposal is typically in the form of an A3 that we coach the learner on creating and solving problems using an A3 format. We have a whole structure around that. And then we critique using the Socratic method. So we teach by asking questions, not giving answers. And then we have a counter proposal, and we continue that process until we get the solution that suits the company, an overall solution for the company. Now, this is much more sustainable. This is respect for people. We're teaching our people how to solve problems, and they get to solve our problems for us. That lets our people turn into a competitive advantage instead of just a cost center. Now, we look at time management. Now, when you look at an organization and say, how much time should the organization spend working in these different areas, we recommend it's split in this split here. If I look at 50% of the time, if this is 100% the whole structure, 50% of the organization's time should be spent maintaining order and standardization. If you read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey, he would call that quadrant 1 stuff. So we're going to spend most of our time just making sure we're doing what we said we were going to do, and that's a lot of work. Operators are doing it, managers are doing it, executives are doing it. Just do what we said we were going to do. Maintain what we said. And it's easier said than done. So you spend 50% of your time doing that. Now, if I look at it by level, we have continuous improvement is going to be about 30 to 40%, and then the 10 to 20% is focused on innovation. So we call this free, low to no cost improvement, and then this is that significant cost. We're changing the game at that point. Now, if you look at it by level in the organization, operators are going to spend most of their time maintaining order. So they're going to follow the standard. We have standardized work. They're going to follow that. We have work standards. The management's checking those standards. So those combined give us standardized work. And then they'll spend a portion of their time doing continuous improvement. As you move up the ladder here, we have supervisors. They're checking. They have things that they have to do standardized, plus they're checking that these are being done. And then they're focused on continuous improvement. Go up to the manager level. They start getting into this innovation piece. What are we going to do 5, 10 years from now? What's this process going to look like? What's the new innovation coming down the line? They're focused on continuous improvement as well. And then they're doing their standard plus checking that this standard is occurring, and then on some frequency actually going down checking this standard. And we call that layered audits. And if you get to the top level, the executive level, they spend more of their time doing innovation, continuous improvement. And you'll notice that smaller portion of their time is focused on standards, and it's typically around plant visits, focused plant visits, looking at the system health, not a parade, not a dog and pony show. It's looking at the health of the system and writing policy that supports the standardization and supports these principles. So where should you start if you're new on this journey? The question first comes up: where should I start? If I had to define lean and I have to all the time. You hear it called lean, you hear it operational excellence, you hear it called continuous improvement. If we had to create a simple definition that says, what should that be? What does that look like if I had to define it simply? Well, it's a system to identify problems and to solve those problems utilizing all of one's people. As simple as that. Now, that's a lot. I mean, the wording is very simple, but that is a big statement. Now, if we look at what a problem is, so we talked about identifying problems. A problem is a deviation to a standard. Now, to have a standard is, a lot of times your problem is you don't have a standard. So you have to have a standard, and then we'll look at, are we deviating from that standard? Now, a standard is a challenging target condition that we can't always meet. So if we can't always meet it, then that ensures we have continuous improvement occurring. Now, if you have targets and goals and you're always meeting them, you're always green, every cycle, every day, every week, every hour, depending on what you're tracking, then you're probably not setting a challenging enough target. So the goal is to expose problems within the organization so we can go solve those problems. A lot of times I hear people say, we didn't have that many problems until we started doing this lean stuff. Well, if you take this definition, just by nature, by doing lean, you're going to have more problems. Why? Because we're actually exposing problems. It's a part of the process. You have to expose them so you can solve them. The alternative to that is, let's hide them so we don't have to solve them, right? And I hide them through inventory, labor, capacity, and floor space, so I get to pay for all of that, plus I get to pay for that problem to continue occurring. So when you do lean, you're going to expose more problems just by design. So when we look at a standard could be a cultural standard. This is how we act. It could be an organizational standard, and it could be technical standard. So depending on what we're looking at, we have standards all across the spectrum. And there could be a deviation in any one of those. There could be a deviation in the culture standard. There could be a deviation in organizational or technical. A lot of people focus more on the technical because it's easy. It's easy to see and understand. The work, when we look at work, when we define what work looks like, the work can reside in manufacturing value stream, which is converting raw goods to finished goods. That's typically the most common application of lean or continuous improvement. It could be design value stream. So taking an idea from concept to launch. That's probably the second most applied. And then you have the business value stream, which is the whole order to cash value stream that's in the front end of the business. So different value streams, different explanation of standards, chasing problems gives us that definition. So simply a system to identify problems and to solve those problems utilizing all of our people. You could spend your career doing that one sentence. So when we look at tools versus principles, a lot of companies, when they decide to do lean manufacturing, they go buy a book and they start implementing tools. One of the most implemented and most misunderstood tools in lean is 5S. So they'll say, hey, let's go 5S something. And what it typically 5S becomes is it's a housekeeping exercise. They'll do 3 S's, and they'll do that about every 2 to 3 years. They don't do in most companies, it's all back around the discipline. They don't do a good job of standardizing and sustaining. And a friend of mine was over in Toyota City, and he was in Toyota City with some Toyota execs, and he's sitting there at dinner, and he kind of elbows the guy beside him. He says, hey, do you guys think you're smarter than Americans? And the Japanese guy says, absolutely not. Americans are some of the most creative, innovative people on the planet. And I agree. If you look at some of the things, the technology that has come out of the U.S., it's pretty amazing. So we are very creative and innovative. He says, but the Japanese guy tells my friend, he says, however, you guys lack discipline. Japanese people are very disciplined. When we create a system, even if it's wrong, if the boss tells you to do it this way, the Japanese worker will do it that way. And they'll do it that way until someone tells them differently. So you guys lack that discipline. you have innovation, but you lack the discipline. So we are more disciplined than you guys. And I agree with that. That says volumes. And if you walk into a manufacturing plant, any U.S. manufacturing plant, the plants that are successful at doing this have a high level of leadership discipline, which translates into worker discipline or, learner discipline if we change that naming. If the leaders are disciplined, you can tell when you walk in the plant. You can also tell when the leaders aren't disciplined. So the biggest struggle you're going to have as a leadership team is leadership discipline. So before you decide to embark on this journey, make sure you're willing to step up the discipline it's going to take to make this successful. So we'll go back to the tools versus principles. The first thing that we always focus on as an organization is the dollars. So whether we're profit or non-profit, if we can't generate cash, we don't get to do all the cool stuff we like to do. So everything we do has to somehow link back to making the organization more money. And it's not that we're greedy. We just believe that, if we're dealing with an organization, we trust that organization knows what to do better with the money than other competitors. So let's get as much cash as we can. We'll figure out what to do with it, whether it be focused on growth, improvement, giving it out as profit sharing, whatever. Let's get as much money as we can. Now, we know to generate cash, we need to focus on flow. And we talked earlier about 3/4 reduction in lead time gives us a 2x increase in productivity, a 20% reduction in cost. To increase flow is a reduction in lead time every time. So to do that, we have to employ different types of tools. Now, we've talked a lot about lean in this, but lean is just one of the tool sets that we'll bring to bear if you guys decide to work with us. We're going to bring lean. We're going to bring Six Sigma. If the problem's with variation, we're going to bring Six Sigma or Shannon to bear. Shannon is another problem-solving methodology that we're experienced in. If it's an overburden condition, we're going to bring TOC, or Theory of Constraints, GOLRATS studies to bear there. And we're going to bring whatever it takes, wherever it takes, to increase flow in your product or service, which will generate more cash. Now, once we generate flow, then we put in standard work that will support that flow that we've created. Then we'll put in visual management systems, lean manufacturing systems, and practical problem solving to help support that standard work. There's going to be a lot of problems exposed here, so we have to be able to deal with those. And then finally, the problems that are being exposed through here, we're going to pick the right tool to solve those problems. So it's not about tools. You'll notice tools came last. We have to know what tool to use, why are we using it, where to create flow to give us the dollar. So that's kind of our philosophy, our approach as a company that we bring to bear at each one of our clients. So if we look, we also want to make sure we have the right mindset. So one of the first things we do is we work with the staff, you guys, and we go through the principles. What do we need to do better? What are we doing well? What do we need to change for each one of these? So we talk about long-term view, having a long-term view versus a short-term view. We talk about what customer intimacy looks like, what it would look like for your organization. We talk about what it means to embrace the total systems, to break down silos within teams. There's a lot of silo functional thinking that happens in organizations over time. We talk about process-centered, not just getting a result, but how do we get that result? How do we ensure we get that result? And how do we get better and better over time? Process yields results. Having this obsession for quality, not just the external quality, not with just our customers, with each process that we own. And we believe with quality processes, we can yield quality products. And it makes people happier. Learning organization. So what are we doing to learn as an organization? What are we going to do going into the future in respect for people? So, through all of this, one of the biggest pleasures I have being a consultant business leader is helping other people. If I can change someone's thinking and help them improve their life, whether it be personal or business, I take a lot of pride in that, and that's really what keeps me going every day, is being able to pour into other people's lives. Business leaders, church leaders, whatever it may be, it's just helping people get better. And at the end of the day, that's what keeps me going. It's what keeps our company going. We're focused a lot on people. We engage all elements of the business. So we're technical. You have a technical focus versus a holistic focus. So we have a holistic focus across the entire business enterprise. We break those down into different areas. So we believe you got to have strong values that are agreed upon. You got to have a strong mission and vision, and you got to have a strategy. Now we work with our clients. Some clients have these already, some don't, and we work with them to create that. Now inside there's going to be cultural elements that will have to be dealt with. There's going to be technical elements. A lot of companies focus on just the technical. So they'll say that's the easy stuff. It's mechanical. We can plan it. We can create a Gantt chart. And they get really excited about the technical, but as you'll see, that's just 1/3 of the whole 3-part here. And then there's the organizational. Do we have the right people in the right positions to do the work that needs to be done to improve the technical and to help us build this culture? So when we merge all those together, and we focus on those together, that's really where the power of lean, operational excellence, continuous improvement, whatever you want to call it, that's really where the power occurs. Now, when we look at the silos and we drive down through the business, we have a process called, you may have heard it called Hoshin Kanri. You may have heard it, we call it strategic deployment. You may hear it called policy deployment, policy management. But at the end of the day, we have a process that we go through where we help teams align. And that alignment is created by, do we have values that are aligned and internalized? So this is why we exist as a business. Let's have that conversation. And then we say, what are we going to do to help bring our values and mission alive? What are our goals, and are they shared? Are they aligned across the organization? This is not just in a function, this is across the organization. Then we, who's going to do the what? So we have the what, who's going to do that, and then how are they going to do it? And then at the end, if there is any interpersonal issues, that's typically the last thing that occurs. But what we see in a lot of organizations is there's a lot of focus here when this hasn't been done. The lack of understanding why, what, how, and who, that drives a ton of misunderstanding right here. So we have a process that walks us through this. And the output of that process is a very clear strategic plan for that team to, everybody's on the same page, we're marching in the same direction. All right, when we look at supporting value for flow, we have a concept that is included in our total systems thinking principle that's called line back. Now, if you're delivering a service, this would be your service providers, the actual providers of the service out with the customer. If you're building a product, this would be your assembly line. So this is the value-added flow in your business, whatever that may be. If you're engineering, it's in engineering design. If it's in the design department, wherever it may be. And the thought is that everybody else in the business, these guys up here, accounting, purchasing, logistics, HR, you guys are there to support these guys. The company does not, unless you're a maintenance firm, the company does not exist for maintenance. So, and if you are maintenance, it's the maintenance to your customers is adding the value, not the maintenance to your system. So when you're thinking about these boxes, these are supporting departments, functions that support this value-added flow. Now, every one of these should focus on how do I provide support to these guys? And then how do I, or my function, remove waste from these guys? Even if it means you're removing waste from them and putting it on yourself or your department. So the thought is the higher up in the organization we can get the waste, the easier it is to deal with that waste. So provide support, remove waste, and then, and only then, focus on doing that as efficiently as possible. So support, waste, then efficiency. Don't get that out of order. If you get that out of order, bad things start happening. Things happen where you'll have an HR function trying to optimize their labor or their productivity by giving work to the plant. That's backwards, right? So if we have enough resources in the plant to absorb HR resources, we might have some excess capacity down or excess labor down there. Short-term focus versus long-term. We have to have a long-term view. Run into failure on equipment versus investment and plan. I see this a lot of times, especially on companies that are trying to flip. They'll take out maintenance and quality. That's two of the first hit areas, and they'll sacrifice the plant. Trial by fire with our employees versus investing in onboarding and development. So that also violates the respect for people. Restoring flow upon finding a problem. Firefighting versus investing the time to permanently correct that problem. So when we have something that inhibits our flow or stops flow, we should ask the question, what are we going to do to make sure that never happens again? And actually invest the time into putting in that countermeasure, or at least understanding the countermeasure and then putting the countermeasure in. Leverage heroic efforts to make the month or quarter versus stability and harmony, leveled work. Pulling in work from next month to make this month, right? Well, you just sacrifice next month. Now you may say, well, I hope they sell it, right? Now, if you have a big bubble out there that is going to exceed your capacity, bringing that in is one thing, but to, not bringing in something just to make the month, not knowing if you're going to have anything else out there, that's a recipe for disaster. And then using OPEX as a short-term fix versus a way of doing business. We should focus on exceeding our business plan goals. We should focus on building up organizational capability, and we should focus on intentionally driving the culture of the business to be more of a problem-solving, respect for people type business. Now, I'm not saying you guys aren't respect for people. I'm just saying that's kind of the culture we want to build is, if you can imagine, 100% of your organization is solving problems for you as a company. That's a pretty cool deal. If you look back to one of the most coveted business systems in the world, it is the Toyota production system. And we can say that because, and when I say Toyota, I'm not comparing cars to whatever you do. I'm comparing a thought process that allowed those guys to make tons of cash. So at the end of the day, Toyota doesn't make cars. They make cars as a product. They make forklifts, but at the end of the day, they make money, and they make tons of money. So when I use Toyota as an example, it's all about that thinking that allowed that to occur. So in the beginning of that, there's a guy named Taiichi Ohno, and he was walking around a post-World War factory, and he was doing three things. He would find the problem, he would fix the problem, and he would make sure that problem never happened again. And that was the genesis of what is considered the most coveted production system in the world. So we want to build that culture. We can replicate that. It just takes time and it takes discipline to do that. So focusing on True North, the concept of True North is ideal perfection. So True North to establish long-term direction. If we set our eyes on this concept of True North, we'll never be finished. We'll have a constancy of purpose that will never end, and because you'll never be there. It's perfection. Focus on eliminating barriers versus dodging barriers. So companies have a habit of saying, that's a barrier, we'll just go around that one. Well, when you decide to go around a barrier, you haven't earned the right to go to True North. It follows the concept of you're never done, and you have to earn the right to take the next step. So let me just explain what True North is. When we come into most organizations, we see what's called a current condition. Now, some of those current conditions would be things like hidden waste and problems. And we talked about before, how do we hide those problems? We hide them with excess inventory, excess labor, excess capacity, and excess floor space. We have overall equipment effectiveness, or OEE, less than 85%. This is just a measure of our assets. How effectively are we using our assets? We have high defect rates and large batches of product moving. Very typical to see that in most environments, manufacturing or services. So you'll see that. What we want to see as a True North, and again, this is not a destination. This is a compass heading. So if I'm here today, I want to be pointed toward this True North. True North are things like 100% value add. So we talked about the definition of value add and how it's 0.1% in most companies. True North would be it's 100%. Now 100% would be everything we do the customer's paying us to do. Now, we all know that that is not possible. It's actually thermodynamically impossible. But if I use that as a compass heading, I'll never be finished. I will constantly have that as a constancy of purpose. 0 defects internal, which ensures I have 0 defects external. One piece flow. So I'm processing one piece, or one piece of data, one piece of product, one service at a time. Batch size of 1. What that would look like is if you're supplying 5 parts to your customer for let's say you're in automotive or HVAC industry, and your customer makes HVAC units, and you supply 5 of the tubes in that unit. You're a copper tube manufacturer, right? So you can make each product individually and ship 5 part numbers to the client, or you could do a batch size of 1, which is I'm going to make all 5 of those together through my process, and I'm going to send them to my customer in a kit for their process. Now, what you've done there is you've reduced your part, at least their part number, by 5, and you've created a process where you manufacture to their pace, not to the 5 individual paces. All right, that's an example of batch size of 1. Human develop means we spend so much time developing our people. They're some of the smartest, brightest people in the industry. Now, a risk there is what? Other people hire your people, right? So, and to me, that's a risk worth taking. It reminds me of a conversation between a CEO and a CFO. They had asked, the CEO had asked that they put together a training plan for the entire plant. They get this training plan together. The CEO gets it. He's freaking out. He runs into the office of the CEO and he goes, "Hey, what if we spend all this money training all of these people and they leave the company?" CEO spins around in his chair. He looks at the CFO. He says, "What if we don't and they stay?" And that's profound. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that it's our job to develop our people and to make them want to stay, not to not develop them so they have to stay. So I'll trade that off any day. Now, when we do set this direction, and we set a true north along this, so you'll hear us say things like it's directionally correct, it's directionally incorrect. If you're making a decision from here that's moving you closer to true north, we're going to call that a directionally correct decision. If you're making a decision that takes you off or backwards in some cases, we're going to call that a directionally incorrect decision. So that's what that phrasing and terminology means. Now, if I'm going from here to here, there's typically going to be barriers. Now, if they weren't barriers here, you'd already be here, right? So there's typically going to be barriers, and we have to earn the right to get to our true north by not diverting off of this true north path here. Now, if I decide to divert, I don't earn the right to get to true north. I have to bust through these barriers. And again, remember, these barriers could be cultural barriers, organizational, or technical barriers. So staying focused, attempting to do everything versus laser focus on the vital few. There's a book written by Stephen Covey's son, Sean Covey, and it's called The Four Disciplines of Execution, where he talks about this stuff here. He talks about the whirlwind, which is your day job, and it's required to keep the doors open, maintain. You're focused on being good today. It's urgent, and it acts upon you. That'd be those quadrant 1 things that his dad, Stephen, talked about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Then you have this new stuff over here, right? The new activities, the things that we're trying to do that moves the organization forward. We're focused on being better tomorrow. It's important, but it's not urgent. It is important. These are what Sean's dad, Stephen, would call quadrant 2 activities. And then those are the things that we act on, right? Now, the problem is that there's a conflict between those two. And they compete for time and energy constantly. Now, in your organization, which one wins? I can tell you, in most organizations, this guy right here wins. So when it's tough and things are going tough, this guy loses, this guy wins. So the challenge here is executing that strategy in the midst of a whirlwind, in the midst of that 100-mile-per-hour whirlwind. That's a challenge. All companies have that challenge. You guys aren't any different than anyone else. The goal is to have a structure that helps us maintain that. So if we look at here, don't narrow your focus here. You're busy enough here, so don't narrow your focus here. We want to narrow our focus here on the goals, the new activities side. And what the Sean Covey's team did, they studied the Fortune 100 analysis. They studied the top 100 companies in the U.S., and they came up with these statistics. If you looked at the number of goals in addition to the whirlwind, right? So they took this whole strategic thing and they said we could do it all, or we could just narrow our focus down to 2 to 3 things. What they found out was, key here with excellence, if they had 2 to 3, they would get 2 to 3 with excellence. So they've narrowed their focus, and now they're nailing those. If they went from 4 to 11, they would actually go down to 1 or 2, and then 12 to 20, they just totally didn't. None of what they tried was with excellence. So when we talk about narrowing the focus, that's what we mean here. Let's focus on the vital few. As a team, let's agree to that. We have a process that takes us through that process to get to that consensus. So the easiest way to paralyze an organization is to overgoal it, and I'm sure you guys have witnessed that. You've been a part of that. And once you do that, that will then become the whirlwind as well, and now we're just totally consumed. So there will always be more good ideas than capacity to execute. This is in one of Sean's, he's got a audio track called Execution. It was at 4th minute, 37th second portion. Again, Covey, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Excellent read. If you haven't read it, I recommend you read it. It's a really good read on execution of strategy. So how do we ensure improvements affect the bottom line? So when we're doing this kind of stuff, it's not just for fun. At the end of the day, we have to impact the bottom line. So everything we do, we need to be thinking like a businessman or a businesswoman. So we want to drive down things like labor, overhead, and total material costs. We want to do activities that drive up revenue, drives up our relationship. So we need to make sure that our metrics, whatever we're tracking on a staff level, that those metrics align with these. So your impact personally or as a staff team, what can you do as a team to impact margin contribution? What can you as a team or individually even do to impact cash flow? What can you do to impact the savings? And then cost avoidance. Now, when a company gets in a crunch, a lot of times they find themselves focused on cost cutting. That's really dangerous, and a lot of times you end up cutting into the capability of the business in the name of cost, and then when the business does come back, you struggle because you cut into the capability. I always give the example of, my boss gave me a weight challenge, and he says, this is fictitious, of course, because I still have all my members, but he, assuming he gave me a 10-pound waist reduction goal, and I got busy throughout the year, and I was like, it's the last quarter, first part of the last quarter, I still haven't gotten 10 pounds, so I go, whap, I cut my arm off. Now, did I lose 10 pounds? Oh yeah, my arm weighs about 10 pounds. So I satisfied the goal, right? How's my golf game? It's probably not too good unless I'm a good, one-arm putter. And then my boss sees that, he's like, in the course of a day, you lost 10 pounds. That's excellent. This division over here is doing really poorly. I need you to give me 10 more pounds because you did that so well. Well, now how's my golf game, right? So the analogy is to just show us that cutting is not saving. So there's different ways to get 10 pounds. I can watch my calorie intake. I can increase my exercise. I can eat healthier, right? So now if I do those, I can lose 10 pounds. How's my golf game? It may even be better. So I lost the 10 pounds and I improved my swing because now I'm healthy and I'm fitter. So be really careful not to focus on cost cutting. Let's focus on cost savings. And there's some ways to do that. You should understand at all time what your impact is as a leadership team on ROI for the work that you and this team is doing. At the end of the day, cash is king. The more cash we can generate, the more we can give it to charity, give it to the, profit sharing. We can invest in new ventures, new markets, whatever. It's just cash is king, so we need to be focused on generating that cash. Now, we do have, Drive Inc. has a free ebook. If you want to use it to continue your study as a staff, it deep dives those 7 principles that I talked about earlier. It gets into a lot of detail. Those serve as excellent examples as book studies. If you did like a principle a month for 7 months, it would definitely generate a lot of conversation among the team. If you would like to have that, just visit us here at this site, driveinc.com, ebook/ebook. There'll be a form there, enter your information, and submit it, and you'll be able to download your copy of the ebook. Thank you again for taking the time out of your staff meeting. I know time is very valuable to you guys. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in a face-to-face meeting, a plant visit. Those are at no charge to you guys to let us come through your factory and see if there's an opportunity for us to work together. And always remember, never let your competition be hungrier than you are. Thank you.